I knew he'd shoot. I just didn't think he'd do it with his eyes first. People talk about bullets like they're the dangerous part. They forget about the look a man gives you right before he decides you're a problem he's allowed to solve. That look hits faster than any round. It strips you down to bone and motive, calibrates the distance, writes your epitaph in the reflection of his visor. On the roof of the dead hotel, the rain kept time. Metal gutter, broken sign. The hollow drum of a rooftop AC unit that hadn't breathed in years. Neon from the port district smeared itself across the puddles, pink and cyan turning the world into a cheap cigarette burn. Below, the city murmured like a crowd at a funeral that had lasted far too long. Across the gravel, Dane Marko lifted his rifle the way other men lifted vows. Not quick, not slow. Precise. The armor of the city guard carved his silhouette into the darkness, broad shoulders, steady feet, the quiet of a law that knew it wouldn't apologize. Hands where I can see them, he said, voice amplified, not loud. Loud begs. This was command. Your city's got more cameras than pigeons, I said. You've been seeing my hands for blocks. Then keep them as you've practiced. His barrel did not tremble. You either surrender, a breath, raindrops ticking on the rifle's shroud, or you fall. He didn't say, or I shoot. He didn't have to. I could hear the faint crackle from his optics, see the micro glow where his targeting HUD adjusted for the rain. Most people can't hear the EM hiss through a guard's lens shield. Most people aren't omega-saboteurs, who spent years making sure a system like his never saw them coming. I appreciate a man who believes in binaries, I said. They're easy to break. Remy Lawson, he said, and the way he said my name tasted metallic. You'll walk, or you'll drop. I'm thinking. I tilted my head. The rain slid down the shaved line behind my ear and found every old burn across my knuckles. You know what's scary? I'm not afraid of either. The crosshair landed square on my chest. The gaze landed first. I counted the thunder, 7, 8. Timing it to the next cargo drone skimming the port's edge. The drone's anti-collision strobes would flare, his optics would blink, and I'd have 3 heartbeats to make a choice I'd rehearsed in too many rooms with too little light. You're boxed, he said. Your little detours bought you seconds, not salvation. Seconds are all salvation needs. His jaw ticked. He was handsome in that way people fear. Clean lines, eyes that never promise comfort. I'd known men like him. I'd served under men like him. I'd burned with orders that sounded like his, and learned which part of me refused to die in their fire. Tell me why, he said. Make this easier. Easier. As if ease had ever been on the table. Long version or short? I asked. He pivoted a step, triangulating. He'd seen my tells from the alleyway 2 blocks back. He'd seen me take the high route, when a safe path opened low. He'd read what I wanted him to read. That was the problem with good hunters. They trusted the story they were trained to see. Short, he said. I didn't betray the pack. Rain hit my lip. I tasted the city's rust. I betrayed a lie. You set the fire. And pulled people out of it. I let the words land soft. Truth doesn't need volume. Just room. Lightning bleached the rooftop. The cargo drone winked its white eye over the river. He fired. Or rather, he decided to. I'd already moved. The charge I'd seated on the neighboring billboard popped a fan of white. No shrapnel, all light. Magnesium wash and thunder kiss. A ghost of a blast meant to blind optics and reset expectation. The air slapped. The roof exhaled. His scope flinched. Auto-dimming. Rain suddenly had edges. By the time his gaze reassembled me, I wasn't where he'd left me. I was a breath to his left, then a shadow behind the HVC, then a reflection in the slick tar that wasn't mine. My lungs stayed slow. Panic is loud. It gets you found. Precision is quiet. It gets you home. Non-lethal. His voice came through the damp like stones under a river. You're generous with collateral. Look who's talking. I stepped from the cover and offered him the smallest silhouette. Palms open, fingers loose, as if peace could be worn. For the record, I scraped the pigeons off the blast radius. City'll file a complaint otherwise. Cute. His stance reset. Knees. Buy me dinner first. Down. We could have danced this for hours. The ritual of hunter and wronged thing. But rituals are just machines, operated by people who don't want to think too hard. I'd thought too hard for too long to let this one run to its usual end. Dane, I said, and his name was smoke between us. You're not wrong to be here. You're wrong about why. On your knees, he repeated. Because duty wears repetition like armor. The rain thickened. The drone's strobes blinked again, and for a heartbeat the whole skyline breathed open. I slid the small drive from the inner seam of my jacket and let it fall at his feet. A coin into a fountain. A wish I was too proud to speak. He didn't glance down. Of course he didn't. Good hunters don't split focus. But he knew something had changed. Some new gravity in the space between us. A weight at his boots that wasn't rain. What is it? He asked, eyes never leaving mine. A reason, I said. He moved first. I moved faster. Not to kill, not even to hurt, just to change. My second charge, smaller, meaner, stitched to the rusted antenna, kicked into a white roar. The billboard across the alley blossomed a sun, the city's neon gulped and spat. And for a second, the whole district forgot what it was supposed to look like. Photons rioted. Filters failed. The rifle's HUD hiccuped. He blinked. One betrayal of the machine. I took the edge of the HVAC, slid, pivoted, tasted copper. My heel skidded on gravel. My shoulder kissed concrete. The world went wet and loud and then clean again. I came up on the far parapet, balancing on the lip, a good step and a bad decision between me and the alley's throat. Lawson, his voice was closer than I liked. He recovers quick, I thought. Of course he does. Marko. I let the rain slick my hair to my skull, and smiled like a man who didn't owe this city anything. Check your feet. He didn't look. He almost did. The tell was a muscle flick near his temple, gone as soon as it arrived. He had discipline like scaffolding, built high, bolted often. He'd hold until he didn't, and then the fall would be long. Last chance, he said. Funny, I answered. That's what I was about to offer you. His finger shifted on the trigger. The rifle inhaled. Somewhere, down in the port, a ship's horn bellowed at the storm like a beast trying to remember its own name. I stepped back into empty space. The alley rose toward me, brick, wire, the bright scribble of a sign for noodles that had never been served in this building. For a moment there was nothing but the drum of rain on my ribs, and the clean, stupid joy of gravity doing exactly what it promised. Then the cable I'd strung between the old laundry vent and the neighboring roof caught me at the hip, swung me like a pendulum, and sent me slamming into a lower ledge that yelped under my weight. Pain. Fine. It meant the math had been right. On the roof above, his shadow crossed the parapet. He wouldn't jump. Not blind. Not without mapping. Not with the city watching. He'd circle. He'd control. He'd do what he was made to do. I rolled, breath shallow, and vanished into the skeleton of the hotel's old sign. The city's hum climbed. The rumor of an explosion already drafting itself into 100 mouths. I could feel his attention still on me. A heat I carried down the rusted stairwell like a hand on my spine. By the time he reached the fire escape, the drive at his feet would be singing. To his comms, in a frequency lean enough to slip past his filters. He'd have to choose to listen. That's the thing about reasons. They do what bullets can't. They ask you to live with what you learn. At the street, rain rose in mist from warm asphalt, turning headlights into ghost fish. I slipped into them, a silhouette among silhouettes, another reflection pretending to be a man. Behind me, above me, the roof throbbed with afterglow. The puddles had stolen the billboard's white, and were giving it back in pieces. In one of them, I saw a face I recognized too well, mine, thin and stubborn, the expression of someone who had already paid, and was still counting the change. The port wailed. The neon blinked. A memory of fire licked the edge of the night. The city I burned hadn't understood it was going to burn for longer. Not buildings, not bodies. Lies. The city tower always smelled like static and glass. The kind of place that thought transparency meant truth. I wasn't in the tower that morning. What follows is what I pieced together later. From Paige's notes, Mara's scrape of the guard logs, and the way Dane's eyes looked when he finally met me in that tunnel. Rain smeared the floor-to-ceiling windows, and every drop drew a crooked line through the skyline, as if the city itself was trying to write its own confession. Dane Marko stood in that pale light, jaw locked, a data stick rotating between his fingers. The drive was silver, standard issue. What wasn't standard was the encryption, 3 layers deep, ghost signatures, in the metadata, all of it too elegant for a common saboteur. Remy Lawson had left it for him like a riddle carved on a gravestone. He slid it into the console. The screen bloomed to life, casting blue across the metal walls. Rows of logs appeared, shipment codes, supply manifests, timestamps from the pack's logistical core, but something was off. Entries were mirrored, overwritten, cut mid-sentence. Someone had been editing history. Morning's not even over, and you're already communing with ghosts, Captain Roy West said from the doorway, voice dry as chalk. His uniform was creased, his loyalty straight. Dane didn't look away from the screen. He left this, for me. The Lawson kid? Not a kid anymore. Roy folded his arms. You really think he's the mastermind everyone paints him as? He used to fix our field dampeners with duct tape and caffeine. Dane didn't answer. The room hummed with air filtration, and the soft rain against glass. The door opened again, smoother this time. Quinn held entered like a scent before a sound. Polished shoes, perfect tie, smile that never reached his eyes. His badge gleamed in the sterile light, the crest of the internal bureau shining like it had something to hide. Gentlemen, Quinn greeted, voice warm as old wine. Our favorite pyromancer left us a souvenir, I see. Dane straightened. He left information. Information, Quinn echoed, circling the console. Remy Lawson's made a career out of that word. He turns dirt into gold, sells it, and by the time you realize the gold was yours, he's already halfway through another sermon about truth. Roy shifted uncomfortably. We've got partial manifests here, warehouse locations, cargo codes, artifacts. Quinn finished softly. Stolen, traded, destroyed. Depends on whose story you buy. He turned toward Dane, eyes kind and cruel all at once. Don't let him get into your head, Marko. That's where he wins. Dane watched the reflection of Quinn's smile in the glass. Too polished, too certain. If he wanted to win, he said, he'd have vanished. He wanted me to see this. Quinn leaned closer, reading the flicker of text. Or he wanted to waste your time while he levels another building. The intercom crackled. A clipped female voice cut through the air. Command directive. Unit Lead Marko, Lawson identified as high-risk target. Engage on sight. Lethal force, authorized upon resistance. Roy exhaled through his teeth. That's escalation. He hasn't even been charged. Quinn smiled again. Just the right amount. Authorization came from above my clearance. We simply follow. Dane's fingers tightened around the console edge. He felt the tremor of choice, the one that precedes regret. Copy directive, he said finally, voice flat. The system registered compliance with a soft beep that felt like betrayal. When they were alone again, Roy muttered, hell of a way to keep peace, shoot first, ask the ashes later. Dane unplugged the drive, pocketed it. He knew this order would come. You think he planned it? I think he counted on it. He turned back to the console and reopened the file on a portable slate, scanning line by line. There, minute differences in handwriting, digital signatures replaced manually. Someone had doctored the reports after they were filed, and whoever it was had access deep inside the system. Hand edits, Dane murmured. Not automated. See the compression anomalies? Roy leaned in. You're saying internal tampering. I'm saying someone rewrote the truth. Lightning flashed outside, washing their reflections into the glass like ghosts overlapping the skyline. For a heartbeat, Dane saw 3 figures. Himself, the loyal captain behind him, and a shadow between. Quinn's perfect outline bending slightly at the edges, as though even the light distrusted him. He killed the screen. No copies. Not yet. Roy frowned. You're hiding evidence now? I'm protecting it. Roy hesitated, then nodded once. Whatever you say, boss. Just don't make me explain it to internal affairs. Wouldn't dream of it. The door sealed after him with a hydraulic sigh, leaving Dane alone with the rain. He moved to the window. Below, patrol lights stitched the streets like veins, red and white pulsing in rhythm with the tower's hum. The reflection in the glass stared back. Tired eyes. A jaw carved from rules. A man built for order in a city allergic to it. He remembered Remy's words on the rooftop. "You're wrong about why." That had stayed. Like smoke you can't wash off. He touched the pocket where the drive rested. Tiny heat through the fabric, as if the metal still carried the fire that made it. Maybe it did. Maybe everything Remy touched remembered burning. Behind him, the console blinked once. One of the altered lines had reverted for a fraction of a second, showing the original entry beneath the falsified one. Warehouse 12. Transfer denied by QH. Then, it vanished again. Dane exhaled through his nose. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Rain drew streaks down the glass, blurring the neon until the whole city looked like it was crying for someone it hadn't learned to mourn. He whispered it more to the reflection than to himself. No emotions, just duty. He'd say it to the glass, I'd hear it hours later on a copied feed. Oaths sound different when you play them back. They keep the pauses in. But the reflection didn't believe him. The docks never slept. They only changed the sound of their breathing. Steel groaning, ropes creaking, foghorns moaning somewhere past the invisible line of water. The air was thick with salt and oil, and something older, something that smelled like rusted guilt. I moved through the skeletons of shipping containers, keeping low, keeping small. My jacket stuck to my back where the rain hadn't finished cleaning the blood. Not mine this time. Just the city's. Up above, white beams of patrol lights combed the alleys between metal giants. The hiss of hydraulics. The echo of boots. The crackle of a voice in my earpiece that wasn't mine. "Lawson!" Dane's voice came through the loudspeaker, calm and cold, distorted by the rain. "You saved yourself that night. Don't make a legend out of it." I ducked behind a half-crushed container, hands pressed to the wet steel. My reflection blinked at me from a puddle. Muddy, hollow-eyed, smiling like it knew something I didn't. I clicked my comm on low frequency. "You think I ran to save myself? Didn't you?" "I saved the ones you didn't see," I said, letting my breath fog the air. "But sure, keep reading your reports. They're bedtime stories for people who sleep too well." The loudspeaker hissed, then went quiet. He was close, too close. I could feel the hum of his tech, sensor lenses adjusting, targeting subroutines sniffing heat through rain. I slipped a small device from my belt, no bigger than a coin, and thumbed the switch. It began to tick. "Just a little flash," I whispered to it. "Not for killing, just for clarity." Boots hit the puddles behind me. I darted between crates, slid under a crane arm, and felt the familiar pulse of adrenaline. Sharp, clean, terrifyingly alive. "Lawson!" Dane's voice snapped again, closer now. "End it. You're cornered." "Funny," I called back. "So are you." The coin detonated. Not a blast, just light. Magnesium glare swallowed the dock, brighter than noon, whiter than truth. The sound that followed wasn't thunder. It was the noise of every camera in a 2-block radius screaming blind. I moved through the afterimage, counting steps, feeling the grid beneath my feet like an old friend. My fingers brushed the sidearm at my thigh. Unloaded. A statement, not a weapon. When the light faded, I was already behind him. Dane turned fast, faster than anyone had the right to move in that armor, and met me mid-strike. Our wrists collided, metal and skin barked against each other. "Still not shooting," I said. "Still not surrendering," he replied. The fight was rhythm, not rage. He swung. Precise. Efficient. I ducked, caught his arm, twisted. He countered, shifted his weight, slammed me against the container wall. The shock rattled my teeth, but I grinned anyway. "You hold back," I said, breathless. "Why?" He shoved me away. "I'm not in the business of killing ghosts." "Then you're in the wrong city." He feinted left, caught me by the collar, and drove me down. My boots scraped against metal. The world tilted sideways. His knee pressed into my chest. The visor of his helmet loomed inches from my face. "Enough," he said. Rain slid down the edge of his helmet, catching the flicker of the dock lights. Behind that visor, his eyes were steady. Too steady. The kind of eyes that looked for lies the way a surgeon looks for tumors. "Tell me what's on that drive," he said. "The one you left me." I laughed, even though my ribs hurt. "If you opened it, you already know. It's incomplete. So's the truth." His jaw tightened. "Who's your buyer?" "Who said I was selling?" "Someone always is." I stared up at him. "You really believe that? That every man has a price?" He hesitated. Just a flicker. But it was there. That pause, where certainty starts to rot. I took advantage of it, twisted, rolled us both into the mud. He swore, briefly human, before regaining his footing. When he straightened, I was already a few meters back, holding nothing but air between us. "Next time you pull that trigger," I said, "make sure you know which side you're on." "I know exactly where I stand." "Do you?" I nodded toward the container behind him. "Because you're standing on a wire." His gaze flicked down just as I triggered the second charge. Another bloom of white. Louder this time, the heat kissing his armor. No shrapnel, no harm, just message. When the flare died, I was gone again, perched on the rusted staircase above the dock. He looked up, scanning the shadows. "You could have taken the shot." "I did." I tossed something down. It clinked at his feet. A spent shell casing, etched with a faint black QR code. "That one's for your archives. Read before you judge." He bent, picked it up, studied it. When he looked up again, I was already halfway across the catwalk, disappearing into smoke that smelled of rain and iron. His voice came softer this time, almost to himself. "Why spare me?" The question drifted up with the steam and hung there, unanswered. From my perch, I could see the lights of the city bleeding into the fog, painting everything the color of confusion. Maybe he'd scan that code. Maybe he wouldn't. Either way, he'd start asking questions. And once a man like Dane starts asking, he can't stop. Below me, the flares still burned low and orange, eating the rain. His shadow stretched long across the dock, a soldier made of doubt and duty. I watched him for a while, until the light guttered out and the smoke reclaimed its color. He stood there, the casing in his hand glinting faintly, as if it were whispering something he didn't want to hear. The wind shifted, bringing the metallic scent of salt and rain to where I crouched. It tasted like endings. He didn't move for a long time. When he finally did, it wasn't toward me. It was toward the sea. And for the first time since this began, I wondered which one of us was actually hunting the other. The safe house used to be a cafe. You could still smell the ghost of it. Burnt beans, cheap sugar, and dreams of better mornings. Now the tables were gone, the counter was a barricade, and the espresso machine held parts of 3 different detonators. I dropped my jacket onto a stool, and hissed when the leather peeled from my arm. The burn along my forearm looked like a topographical map of bad decisions. Still attached, I muttered to the empty room. "That's progress." A cat blinked from the doorway, mangy, gray, unimpressed. He'd claimed the threshold like a sentry. When I came back from a job, he'd inspect me as if deciding whether I still deserved to exist. "Relax," I told him, reaching for the first aid kit. "No explosions planned tonight." He yawned, stretched, and proceeded to curl up directly on the tripwire line. "Perfect." I patched myself up, poured a splash of antiseptic, and hissed again. Yeah, I said through my teeth. "I know. It's my fault, everything's my fault. You sound like my commanding officer." The comm link on the counter buzzed, throwing a pale glow across the chipped tiles. "Speak of devils," I muttered, and answered. Mara Ash's face appeared, half lit by the flicker of a dozen monitors. Her goggles were perched on her forehead, hair in a knot that looked structurally unsound. "Remy," she drawled. "Please tell me the fireworks I saw over Dock 11 weren't your doing." "Technically, only the second one was mine." Her eyebrows shot up. "You again blew up a roof?" "Just the facade. I adjusted the bandage on my arm. And maybe a little bit of my reputation." "Remy, your reputation was a crater 3 years ago." I smiled despite the sting. "So I just keep expanding it. Urban renewal." She sighed, rubbing her temple. "You're impossible. I prefer difficult to predict." Mara's tone softened. "You okay?" "Define, okay." She looked at me, the way only someone who had seen too much static on the line could. You're burning through favors faster than I can falsify reports. Quinn's getting suspicious. I hesitated, fingers drumming the counter. He should be. The more he looks at me, the less he'll look at what's under his feet. That's noble, she said, smirking, in a suicidal way. Yeah, well, I replied. Dying's overrated. I tried it once. Boring as hell. She laughed, short and real. Send me the data from the casing you left him. Already done. Then get some rest. And for the love of code, feed that cat before it feeds on you. Copy that, ma'am. Her feed cut out, leaving me alone with the hum of rain outside. The cat blinked again, unimpressed by my near-death charm. I slid a saucer of canned tuna toward him. Fine, you win, Colonel Whiskers. He purred like a broken motor, and dug in. For a while the silence was almost kind. The rain on the roof made a rhythm my heart could almost keep. I poured what passed for coffee from the ancient mocha pot, and sat by the window, watching neon bleed through the water stains. Being a ghost was supposed to make life easier. No one to answer to, no one to lose. But ghosts still feel hunger, still flinch when the past walks by in someone else's uniform. I caught my reflection in the glass, pale, tired, but still breathing. You're not done yet, I told it. Meanwhile, this isn't my room to tell, but I learned the shape of it later. Across the city, Dane Marko stared at his own reflection in a different window. The tower's archive room was silent except for the soft whir of servers and the hum of fluorescent lights. He'd been staring at Archive 17 for an hour. Each line in the report looked clean until you actually read it. Then the seams began to show. Timestamps shifted, authorization numbers missing, signatures cloned and pasted. Quinn's name appeared where it shouldn't have. Dane rubbed the back of his neck. No, he muttered. This doesn't add up. He compared the logs again. Someone had manually rewritten the entries, leaving just enough accuracy to pass a cursory scan. But Remy's encryption on the flash drive had pulled the original fragments out like bones from the dirt. His stomach sank. If Lawson's data was real, then the explosion wasn't a cover-up, it was a cleanup. And Dane had been hunting the wrong man. The thought sat heavy in his chest. He wasn't built for doubt. Duty didn't make space for it. But it was there now, sliding in like cold water through a crack in the armor. He leaned back in his chair, exhaled, and looked toward the glass wall. The rain outside carved trails down the city lights, turning every reflection into a confession. 2 different rooms, same rain. Remy lifted his cup. Dane straightened his tie. Different men, same silence. Both of us staring out at the same city, both wondering what part we'd played in breaking it, and whether it could still be fixed. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere above the harbor, and for a moment, it sounded almost like laughter. The corner cafe still pretended it cared about mornings. Real flowers in a chipped jar, a chalkboard with a smiley face that had seen better chalk. Steam ghosted the windows, blurring the street like the city was trying to redraw itself, softer this time. That's how it looked on the archive cam. 2 rooms, same storm. Different armor cracking in different places. Dane Marko sat at a table near the door, because men like him blocked exits without thinking about it. He stirred coffee that didn't need stirring, and waited for the woman who'd said she had curiosity and inconvenient facts. Paige Ree arrived in a yellow raincoat, the color of stubborn sunshine. She unzipped it with a flourish, like she was unveiling a magic trick, and shook rain from her curls. Captain Marko, she said, sliding into the chair opposite. You look like a man who slept in policy briefs. Ms. Ree, he replied. You look like you didn't. I never sleep in policy briefs, she said. I just haunt them. He didn't smile. She did. It didn't stop her eyes from clocking everything, his clean knuckles, the new crease between his brows, the way he kept his pistol hand free under the table. Reporters, like predators, know where the soft parts are. I'm told you enjoy rumors, he said. I enjoy the truth. She tapped her phone, face down. It's just that rumors sometimes lead to it like a drunk friend to a party. Noisy, incorrect, and somehow inevitable. Get to your point. She leaned in, lowering her voice. Quinn held his cleaning. Aggressively. Logs, manifests, Notes. The kind of clean that only happens when there's a lot of dirt. Dane kept his stare even. You have evidence. Not a smoking gun. A lot of smoke. She slid a napkin toward him. On it, a list of warehouse numbers and partial codes, in neat, relentless handwriting. These records used to be accessible, they aren't anymore. And the backups have gaps, like teeth knocked out. Neat gums though. Very hygienic. Paige sipped her coffee. Too clean is still dirty, Captain. Especially in this city. He didn't touch the napkin. Why bring this to me? Because you're the kind of man who believes he's a wall. And walls are useful when fires start. She tilted her head. Also, I heard you've been looking at Archive 17. Word gets around. From whom? She smiled. From the kind of people who order decaf in a black market. Ms. Paige, she corrected. We're on a first-name basis with the apocalypse, you and I. We might as well be with each other. He exhaled. If you're wrong, I run a retraction. If I'm right, you're hunting the wrong wolf. She tapped the napkin. And Quinn held his hanging garlic on the wrong door. He finally picked up the napkin. The handwriting was steady. Sure. This doesn't leave the table. Everything leaves the table, she said, standing. That's what tables are for. But I'm not your enemy, Dane. I like cities that survive their own lies. Why tell me that? Because if I don't, you'll decide it yourself, and I won't like your first draft. She zipped up her raincoat. Oh. And if someone accuses you of conspiring with a notorious saboteur tonight, you should ask yourself why they wanted you loud right when you needed to be quiet. She left with the bell over the door, making a cheerful noise that felt sarcastic. Dane sat with a napkin full of trouble, and a cup of coffee that had gone cold. 2 districts away, the cat on my tripwire had decided the wire was a personal insult, and was sleeping across it out of spite. I crouched, fed him another bribe, and winced when my forearm tugged against the bandage. The comm crackled to life. Mara's face jumped onto the battered tablet, grainy and overlit, like a saint in a broken stained glass window. Delivery for 1 Remy Lawson, she said. Contents, fresh sin and side-eye. Sign me up. She sent the packet. Compressed logs, scraped caches, archived comms that shouldn't have survived a competent purge but did, because egos forget the corners. The transfer bar crawled. Quinn's been busy. She propped her chin on her fist. Cleaning. With bleach. On the brain. Let me guess. I skimmed the first file. The kind of clean that squeaks. The kind that squeaks right before it snaps. Mara's mouth twisted. You know, I'm going to be scrubbing your fingerprints off city systems for a decade. I'll knit you a thank you sweater. In prison orange. She arched an eyebrow. Make it my color and I'll consider it. Listen, Remy, he's rerouted shipments through dummy hubs. Some confiscated artifacts never made it to evidence. A lot of them are charm grade. Nothing dramatic. A few are not. Not as in, don't touch with bare hands, unless you want to dream in other people's nightmares. She paused. He's also flagged your name in 3 separate kill authorizations. 3. I whistled. Overachiever. You're an expensive problem. It's sweet in a way. She softened. Meet him. Who? Dane, before this tilts too far. Neutral ground. He doesn't shoot unless someone tells him to, and he's starting to ask who's doing the telling. I looked at the cat cleaning his paw like the world wasn't a stack of flimsy lies. He'll come alone? He'll come honest. That's rarer. I sent the location ping. Old service tunnel under the Riverlight tracks. If the city collapses, it'll be because we met there. Mara made a face. I hate that tunnel. Smells like wet regret. Perfect, I said. Fits the theme. Try not to blow it up. Just the facade, I said, unable to help myself. She sighed. I'm going to have to wash you off my conscience later, aren't I? Probably, I said. Bring bleach. The tunnel had been a promise once. A shortcut between places people didn't want to admit they were going. Now it was a throat of damp brick and echo, water dripping from a spine of old pipes. The lights hummed and flickered, turning the air into a slow strobe. I heard him before I saw him. Not boots. Breath. Measured. The kind a man uses when he's giving himself orders. Dane stepped into the light with his visor up, rein on his hair, hand near his holster but not on it. He stopped 3 paces away. Close enough to matter. Far enough to lie to himself about it. "You could have said the truth then," he said, voice low. "On the roof, on the docks. And you could have heard it," I answered, matching his tone. But we both spoke the languages we were paid to. A drop fell from the pipe overhead, and found the edge of my collar. Another landed on his cheekbone, and ran a line down to the corner of his mouth. We watched each other like men on opposite cliffs pretending the river was shallow. "You set the fire," he said. "I pulled people out of it." I nodded at the packet open on his slate. "And I brought you the people who lit the match." He studied me. Not a glare, not a stare. A reading. "You expect me to trust the word of a man who builds bombs. I expect you to trust your own eyes when the paperwork lies." I took a breath. "Quinn's neat. Too neat." His mouth flattened. "I've noticed." "Then notice this." I stepped closer, enough to see the flecks in his irises. The scar near. His temple that had a story I wanted to hear and couldn't afford. "You're a good man with bad instructions. Change the instructions." "Is that an order?" "It's an invitation." We stood like that. Rain talking to the city above us, water ticking the seconds onto concrete. He didn't draw. "I didn't run. You could have killed me at the docks," he said at last. "I could have tried," I said. "I don't like my odds against your stubbornness." He huffed something that might have been a laugh if the night were kinder. The sound bounced down the tunnel and came back as a question. He took 1 step back. Not fear. "Choice. I'll verify this," he said, holding up the slate. "If you're lying, you'll catch me," I finished. "I know." He turned to go, then paused and looked over his shoulder. The tunnel light cut his profile into clean geometry. Duty made flesh, trying to remember where he'd put his doubt. "We're not allies," he said. "No," I agreed, "but we finally stopped being enemies of the wrong thing." He left with the measured stride of a man walking away from a line he'd been standing on for too long. I watched him, until the strobe ate his silhouette, and the drip took his footsteps. When I stepped out into the night, I checked behind me out of habit. Just a glance over the shoulder. Reflex, prayer, both. He wasn't aiming at my back, and I wasn't running, not yet. The tower's upper floors were quieter than churches, and twice as sanctimonious. Thick carpet ate footsteps. Frosted glass turned people into shapes that never quite resolved. Dane Marko walked the hallway like a man keeping his hands off the fire alarm, jaw set, questions locked and loaded. Quinn Held's office was all curated restraint, matte black desk, a single bonsai that had been bullied into beauty, a wall of commendations that looked allergic to dust. Quinn stood when Dane entered, smile preloaded, tie the color of old money. "Marko," he said, voice warm as an apology you didn't deserve. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Dane didn't sit. "Warehouse 12. Transfer orders. Why were they denied under your authorization?" Quinn's smile deepened, as if Dane had complimented his taste. "Procedural irregularities. You know how it is. Chain of custody, mislabeled crates. Better to pause than to contaminate evidence." "Pause," Dane repeated. "For 4 months. Bureaucracy moves at the speed of caution." Quinn gestured to a chair. "Please." Dane remained standing. "Page Re has records that disappeared from public logs. I found compression anomalies in Archive 17. Hand edits. Your initials float where they don't belong." Quinn's eyes half-lidded, the professional equivalent of rolling them. "Ms. Re is a talented fabulist. If we started governing by journalists' drafts, we'd all be unemployed." He steepled his fingers. "As for the archive, Marko, you're tired. Conspiracy is a seductive story. It flatters our sense of importance." "What's flattering," Dane said, "is thinking your signature won't be checked." He slid a tablet onto the desk. "Authorize this query. Let it ping the original hash. If the system returns mismatch..." Quinn didn't look down. "If we indulge every field officer looking for a hero's arc, we'll never leave our desks." Dane's knuckles whitened. "This is not an arc, it's evidence." "It's data," Quinn corrected softly. "Evidence is what an institution accepts. We accept that Lawson is dangerous. We accept that he manipulates soldiers. We accept that your proximity to him makes you vulnerable. He tilted his head. Sympathy lacquered over something sharper. And we accept that you're loyal. I know you are. The room measured the silence that followed. Dane heard his own pulse, slow and deliberate, like a man counting to 10 to keep from ending a career in one sentence. The intercom chimed. A voice from the pit, detention secured. Subject Lawson in interview 2. Quinn's smile brightened. Perfect timing. We can anchor this conversation in reality. Interview 2 had no corners. That was the point. Rounded walls, rounded table, rounded chair legs. The geometry of compliance. The only square thing was the mirror, and even that lied. Remy sat with his wrists cuffed to a loop in the tabletop. He looked like a man humoring a bad joke. Rain had dried in his hair, leaving it salt white at the edges for a second before the room's air raised it again. Roy West stood against the wall, arms folded, eyes doing the work the cameras pretended to. He clocked everything. The raw edges around Remy's cuffs, the way Dane kept his hand away from his holster. Like he didn't trust the urge, the fractional lift of Quinn's chin when he saw Lawson sitting so still. "Mr. Lawson," Quinn began, seating himself opposite with a slow, elegant care. "You've had a busy week." Remy tipped his head. "You should see my calendar." I penciled "don't die" between coffee and existential dread. Dane dragged a chair to the table and sat, rigid. "Why the drive, Lawson? Why the code on the casing?" Remy looked at him, not through him. "Because you read." Quinn's smile thinned. "He writes too. Scripts, most of them." Scene 1. Humble saboteur saves children. Scene 2. Evil bureaucrat twirls mustache. "I prefer Scene 3, Remy said. "Everyone realizes mustaches went out of style." Roy fought a smirk, and lost. Quinn placed both palms on the table, fingers spread like a sermon. "You want a deal?" "Deals require leverage. All you've brought is noise." Remy's gaze didn't leave Dane. "I brought you the part of the story your reports forgot. You know I'm not lying." He leaned forward, the cuffs clicking quietly. "You just don't want to believe it." Dane felt the words land in that exact place he'd been refusing to name since the docks. He kept his face neutral. "Prove it." Remy smiled without warmth. "Ask the system." Quinn's look toward the mirror was so fast most people wouldn't have seen it. Roy did. He saw too the way Quinn's right foot began to tap under the table. A metronome for a song he didn't intend to dance to. Dane slid his tablet forward. "Run my query against the original hashes, in the evidence vault." Quinn didn't touch it. "We don't indulge rogue diagnostics in the middle of interrogations." Remy's eyes flicked to the mirror. "Good thing we're not in the middle then." In the ceiling, something hummed that shouldn't have. The overhead light stuttered. The screen on the wall, usually a polite blue, blinked, coughed, and vomited a cascade of text. Mara Ash did not believe in small entrances. The evidence vault's interface smashed onto the display like a tide, directories, flowering open, hashes scrolling, file trees sprouting in luminous white. Then images, scans of manifests, signatures stacked and cross-faded, 2 signatures bearing Quinn's initials superimposed. Nearly identical but not quite, the differences pulsed in angry red rings. Roy whistled low. "Well, I'll be—" "Kill the feed," Quinn snapped into the intercom, composure tearing at the edges. "Now." No one responded. The feed did not care for orders. More windows opened, confiscation logs rerouted to dummy hubs, messages with subject lines that smiled too broadly, timestamps that quoted each other like alibis at a party. An entire tree of paused transfers, all paused in the direction of private buyers. Dane felt the floor tilt an inch. Not enough to stumble, just enough to make standing a choice. Remy cleared his throat. "As exhibits go, this one's very modern." Quinn stood. The smile was gone. What remained was teeth. "This is a breach. You," he pointed at Remy, "or your accomplices." "Quinn," Dane said, calm as he could make it. "Sit down." Quinn did not sit. He pressed 2 fingers to the underside of the table, where a panic stud lived. The door locks thunked. Somewhere in the hall, a siren woke like a thing startled from sleep. "Security," Quinn said, voice shedding warmth, acquiring frost. Protocol read. Lawson is to be terminated. And Marko, he glanced at Dane, the venom finally visible, has been compromised. Contain both. Roy's hand hovered at his sidearm, eyes cutting to Dane for the briefest beat that said, "Tell me we're not doing this." Dane opened his mouth. The lights died, darkness fell in a clean sheet. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. In the blackout, the tower was just a spine of humming machinery and men holding their breath. Then emergency strips along the floor flickered on, throwing up a sick green. The door shook, boots hammered outside. Quinn backed toward the wall, hand going for his concealed piece. "End it," he hissed to the mirror. Now. The two-way glass popped, a spider web of cracks chasing itself across the pane. Not from a bullet, from pressure. A maintenance jack braced and shoved by someone who knew the corridor better than the map. The glass surrendered. A guard stumbled through, blinking. Behind him, chaos bloomed, shouted orders. The thump of a breaker being thrown, somewhere a generator coughing to life. Roy drew and put himself between Quinn and Dane without thinking about it. "Captain, don't." Quinn spat, weapon clearing leather, hand steady. He aimed at Remy first, then re-aimed at Dane because rage doesn't always choose well. The shot cracked. The room flinched. Remy moved. It wasn't pretty. It was efficient. He'd tipped his chair halfway back when the lights failed. Now he drove the momentum forward, metal legs scraping, wrists twisting in the cuff ring. The first bullet kissed the steel where his throat had been. The second would have found Dane's chest, if Remy hadn't thrown the chained weight of his body into Dane's shoulder, knocking him off the line. They hit the floor together. Pain rang like a struck glass. Dane tasted copper and something like debt. "Up," Remy grunted, rolling, using the table as lever, yanking Dane with him. "Unless you like holes, where blood goes." Boots flooded the doorway. A flashlight trolled the room. Roy barked, "Hold your fire!" and stepped into the cone like a lighthouse, weapon trained not on Remy, not on Dane, but on Quinn. "Drop it," Roy said. Quinn's nostrils flared. For a second, Dane saw the man under the suit, the certainty, the hunger, the belief that he was the crest, and therefore could not stain. He fired anyway. Roy's shot took the gun from Quinn's hand, sent it cartwheeling into the dark. Sparks bit the floor. Quinn clutched his fingers, eyes feral. "Protocol nothing," Roy growled. "We don't shoot our own." The corridor alarms wailed. Somewhere, power crawled back into the grid, lights stuttering toward life. Remy shouldered Dane toward the shattered glass, cuffs still biting his wrists. "You're welcome," he said. "Because some habits are armor." Dane swallowed, vision clearing, the shape of choices hardening around him like cast metal. He looked at Quinn, sweating, shaking, a saint's smile cracked into a snarl, and then at Roy, steady as a post in a flood. "Stand down," Dane told the team in the doorway, voice carrying the weight of rank he hadn't used like this in years. "Held is under arrest." Silence took a breath. "On whose authority?" Quinn demanded, clutching his ruined hand. "On mine," Dane said. "And on the cities that you sold." For a heartbeat, the whole tower balanced on a hinge. Then safeties clicked. Weapons lowered. Someone exhaled a prayer. Remy, still cuffed, leaned close enough that Dane felt the heat of him through the chill. "Told you," he said softly. "I don't like my odds against your stubbornness." This time, Dane almost smiled. Stay alive long enough to be right twice. Outside, the siren wound down. The green strips dimmed. The tower remembered its shape. Inside, something else did too. A crest, finally aware of its stain. And a lawman finally choosing where to stand. The square outside City Hall was a throat full of neon and nerves. Rain slicked the stones until every light became two, the real and the reflection trembling together. Screens wrapped the tower facades, running the official broadcast, press conference, public statement from the City Guard Command. Except this time, the feed wasn't theirs. Mara's voice crackled in Remy's earpiece. "You're live in 3, 2, 1. Try not to swear." "I don't swear," he muttered, flicking the switch on the console patched into the public grid. "I narrate catastrophes. You are the catastrophe, she said, grinning through static. Across the plaza, people looked up as the official crest blinked off every screen. Then a new image appeared, the crest again, but marred. Its center blackened, its gold edges running like molten paint. Good evening, city. Remy's voice filled the air. Calm, low, impossible to ignore. My name is Remy Lawson. You've heard it. You've heard what they say I am. On cue, the footage began to roll. Warehouse schematics. Shipment manifests. Quinn Held's authorization codes duplicated across multiple accounts. Video of confiscated artifacts disappearing into private vaults. A network of deception glowing across the map like a diseased constellation. Truth, Remy said, isn't a virtue here, it's a liability. But you deserve to see what you've been asked to protect. Inside the hall. Chaos. Quinn slammed his palms against the command console. Shut it down. Pull the feed. It's coming through every grid node, an aide stammered. Someone mirrored the archive access through guard infrastructure. Sir, it's internal. Then, cut internal. Quinn snapped, his voice cracking like glass. In the corner, Roy and Dane stood by the entrance, watching him unravel. The room smelled of sweat and circuitry. Do it, Quinn shouted, or I'll... You'll what? Dane said quietly. Blame another ghost? Quinn froze, mid-step. The two men faced each other across the room. The general and the soldier, the architect and the wall he'd built. Marko, Quinn said, regaining his composure, the smile crawling back. Be sensible. He's manipulating you. Lawson doesn't care about this city. He wants revenge. Dane holstered his weapon. Then why expose you instead of running? Because he's clever. No, Dane said. Because he's right. Outside, the feed split again. Mara had synced Paige Ree's live stream. Ladies and gentlemen, Paige's voice chimed through the speakers. We interrupt this crisis to bring you a better one. The camera tilted to show her standing in the rain, coat clinging to her, eyes bright with adrenaline. I'm streaming this because history hates closed doors. If you're watching from home, you're part of the jury. Paige, Mara hissed in her ear, you're welcome for the bandwidth. You're a goddess, Mara. I prefer digital demon, but fine. Paige smiled into the camera. The files you're seeing come directly from the guard's internal servers. Verified. Cross-checked. Signed by the very man who built the walls meant to hide them. Behind her, the screens replayed the scene of Quinn's authorization orders, overlaid. With the city's budget cuts, the flow of illegal sales funding private mercenaries. The crowd's murmur swelled into a pulse. Dane stepped out onto the balcony, overlooking the square. The light from the screens painted his armor in flickers of blue and white. Every camera turned to him as he took the podium. I was told to hunt a man, he began, his voice amplified not by tech, but by conviction. A man, I was told, had betrayed this city. The square went silent, except for the rain. I followed orders. I believed what I was shown. I believed we were clean. He looked down, then back up. We weren't. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I stand here as an officer of the guard, and I say this to all of you. Our system failed you. It failed us. But failure isn't rot. Hiding it is... He looked up at the nearest screen, where Remy's face filled the frame from somewhere unseen. You wanted the truth, Dane said. Now you have it. From the side of the stage, Roy emerged, dragging Quinn held by the arm. His wrists bound, the gold insignia of his rank torn from his collar. The crowd recoiled at first. Then the noise grew, outrage and disbelief and something else, relief. Quinn's voice was hoarse. You think this saves you? He hissed. You've lit the match, Marko. Cities burn fast. Dane met his gaze. Then maybe they'll finally see the ashes. Roy handed him over to the containment squad. For the first time, Quinn looked small. Just another man in the rain. Up on the rooftops, Remy watched it unfold. Mara's voice hummed in his ear, softer now. You did it. He laughed under his breath. You mean, we did it? You sure about the we? Always. Below, Paige signed off her stream with a final line that made him smile. The city's dirty, But maybe tonight, it remembered how to clean itself. Remy adjusted the comm frequency. Mara, pull the plug in 60 seconds. You're not sticking around for the curtain call? I don't do curtains. Dane might be looking for you. He always is. He turned from the edge, the glow of fire and light washing his face. The plaza reflected in every pane of glass around him, the crowd's voices rising like surf. For a heartbeat, the whole city was alive, angry, awake, burning in the right direction. Down below, Dane looked toward the rooftops, as if he could sense the shadow watching. He's gone, Roy said beside him. Not gone, Dane murmured. Just ahead. Rain hissed against the pavement, turning flame to steam. The red glow from the screens softened into gold. Across the crowd, people began to cheer, not for victory, but for survival. On the roof, Remy stepped back into the smoke curling from a nearby vent. His silhouette blurred in the haze, merging with the night. Mara's voice faded through the static. What now, Remy? He smiled, unseen. Now? We see what grows after fire. And with that, the signal cut. The last thing the city saw on every screen was the crest. No longer polished, no longer perfect. Just a blackened mark, shaped like truth. Morning came quietly, as if the city had promised not to wake anyone too soon. The port smelled of rain and seaweed, and something almost like peace. Neon signs were off for the first time in weeks, their colors faint ghosts on the wet pavement. The sky wasn't silver or blue, but a soft bruised gold that belonged to the in-between. After ruin, before rebuilding. Dane walked the boardwalk alone. No armor, no insignia, no weapon at his side. Just a worn gray shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, collar open to the air. The kind of man you wouldn't look at twice. Except his posture still carried command. And his eyes still looked like they'd memorized too much. The cafe at the corner looked almost new in the light. Same cracked tiles, same bent sign, but someone had scrubbed the soot off the windows. The smell of coffee cut through the salt in the air, grounding the world back into something human. He paused outside the door. Through the glass, Remy Lawson was bent over the counter, sleeves rolled, coaxing an ancient grinder back to life. His hair was longer now, or maybe it was just messier. The bandage around his wrist was gone. The cat, the same arrogant gray sentinel, slept in the window, one paw flicking at invisible ghosts. The bell over the door chimed as Dane stepped inside. Remy didn't look up right away. If you're here to arrest me, he said, voice even, you'll have to wait until I finish this shot. Priorities. Depends, Dane said, leaning against the counter. You planning to resist? Remy glanced up, a crooked smile ghosting across his face. Always. But I might serve coffee first. He poured the grounds, tamped them with careful fingers. The hiss of the espresso machine filled the silence. A small, domestic kind of thunder. Dane watched him move, the precision still there but no edge now. Only rhythm. Small motions stitched together like a man trying to stay steady. Didn't think you'd come back here, he said. Didn't think the city would let me. It didn't, Dane replied. You just didn't ask. Remy chuckled under his breath, setting 2 cups on the counter. Sounds like me. Sounds like trouble. Same thing. They stood across from each other, the coffee steaming between them. Dane reached for a cup, fingers brushing Remy's. Neither pulled away fast enough. You fix the grinder, Dane said after a pause. Remy tilted his head. You noticed. I notice things, Dane said. Quiet now. Lately more than I used to. Perks of being wrong, Remy said. You start paying attention. Outside, the first ferry horn echoed across the harbor. The sun finally broke the horizon, turning the wet docks into glass. You're still in uniform, in here, Remy said softly. Even without it. Habit, Dane answered. Or damage. Remy smiled. Same thing. He moved around the counter, wiping his hands on a towel. You could have disappeared, you know. No one would have blamed you. The guard's cleaning house. Paige says the city council actually listened to her article. Mara's setting up a civic net, helping rebuild the archives. I heard, Dane said. You've been keeping track. I like knowing where the sparks landed. Dane exhaled, something halfway between relief and laughter. You sound almost optimistic. Don't tell anyone, Remy said. I have a reputation to ruin. The pause that followed wasn't heavy, just careful. The kind of silence two men build when they've run out of excuses but not out of words. Dane finally said, "There's talk about reinstating me. Should I congratulate you or warn you?" "I haven't decided yet." Remy nodded. "You'll decide for both of us anyway." "Not this time." That earned a real look. Surprise. Maybe something softer behind it. "So you're saying you'll listen?" "I'm saying I'll try." "Progress," Remy said. "Dangerous," Dane countered. They both smiled. The cat stretched in the window and yawned like it was bored of all this unresolved humanity. Remy reached over, absently scratching its head. "He trusts you," Dane said. "He's an idiot." "That makes two of us." Remy glanced up at him, and the air shifted. Still easy, but charged. "You didn't come here for coffee, did you?" "I did." Dane held his gaze. "But I'll take whatever else you're serving." "Careful," Remy said, voice dipping into humor. "I've been known to add explosives to the menu. Without the fuse, I hope." "That depends on the company." Dane nodded toward the cup. "You going to charge me for this?" Remy shrugged. "First one's free. After that you start paying in honesty." "Steep price." "You can afford it." Dane took a sip, grimaced, then smiled. "Still bitter." "Still alive," Remy said. The light hit the glass behind him, turning the whole cafe gold. For a heartbeat, Dane saw the man he'd hunted. The man he'd doubted. The man who somehow survived both. Not the saboteur or the fugitive. Just Remy, standing there in the morning, with the world finally quiet enough to hear their own breathing. He set his cup down. "So, no Mark?" Remy's smile turned real, slow, deliberate. "No Mark." He poured another shot, slid it across. "Just coffee." Their fingers brushed again. This time, neither of them looked away. Outside, a ferry engine started up, the smoke curling pale and thin across the water. The bridge in the distance gleamed where sunlight struck it, vapor rising from the asphalt like ghosts deciding to leave. The city exhaled. Dane straightened. "What will you do now?" "Stay," Remy said. "Build something small. Maybe fix what I can reach. That's not much." "It's a start." "Current." Dane nodded once. "Maybe I'll see you around." "Maybe you already do." He laughed, low and honest. "You know, for a man who blew up half the skyline, you talk like a philosopher. For a man who almost shot me, you talk like you're forgiven." "Am I?" Remy looked at him for a long moment. "You will be. Eventually." The bell over the door chimed again as Dane turned to leave. Sunlight caught the edges of his hair, setting a faint halo of light before he stepped outside. Remy watched him go. The city behind him waking up in layers, vendors opening, shutters, gulls crying. A child's laughter carried by the wind. He went back behind the counter, set the grinder to work again. The sound was soft, steady, ordinary. For the first time, it felt like music. Outside, the bridge shimmered in the reflection of the river, steam curling from its arches, sunlight scattering across the waves. Remy leaned on the counter, watching the horizon with the faintest smile. "The city I burned," he murmured, "is breathing again." He paused. Let the words sit there, light as air. "And for once," he added, "it's doing it by my choice."